Worked in consciousness, awareness all his life, and he has a strong point in magnetics. He worked for many years with Otis Carr. You may be familiar with the story by now. If you're not, it's a very exciting story. They built several vehicles that basically teleported. This was in the late 50s and early 60s. Ralph was a technician on that project. He now lives in Las Vegas, and we're very happy to have him here. I think we're very blessed. So let's welcome Ralph Ring.
Are we okay? Well, good evening. I want to thank everybody for coming to listen to my story. I want to thank the source for being here. And I want to thank Project Camelot. They're the main reason I'm here. I had gone into seclusion for a while. I had retired from a long life of being a locksmith for 35 years. And I had, for 40 years, I tried to get people interested in levitation, in teleportation, things of that nature, which were very simple to me and the people I worked with. But nobody, they either didn't believe it or they thought, well, it's just not going to happen or something. So anyway, along came Project Camelot and said that the time now is changing where people would listen now to things that I once said were scoffed at or not listened to. And they asked me if I'd do an interview. I said, okay. So they took one interview, and I don't know, the sound on it didn't come out right, so they came back and did another interview. And that somehow got on. I didn't know it was going on the internet, but it went on the internet. And I started getting responsive calls from people on my email and some of the phone numbers that I had let out. And people said, yeah, we are really genuinely interested. We want to hear what you're talking about and see if there's any value there that we can use to foster this technology. So that being said, I was told to wear a jacket tonight, and I see everybody else is casual. I envy you all. I don't know why I got a jacket on now, but I do. I'm here. I would have come in on one of our craft, truly, if it hadn't been confiscated 40 years ago. It was taken and put in someplace in, I think it was called, it's in New Mexico. It's an underground facility that the government has, and it's nine stories down. It was seen by a professor friend of mine several years after it was confiscated. And I was told that they had tried to operate it, which was unsuccessful. They tried to mount weapons on it, which was also unsuccessful. And the reason was because they didn't have the keys. They didn't know how to operate it because the keys lie in consciousness, in a conscious awareness of what they're looking at. Tomorrow morning, you'll be listening to a good friend of mine, Jim Murray, who has a device that's been working for years that scientists from all over the world have looked at his machine and verified to everybody's satisfaction that it was a working machine, putting out more energy than it was drawing. And the group that was interested in it said, well, yeah, but it's working, but it's violating the second law of thermodynamics. You can't have something working like this. It doesn't. Our science says it can't work, even though they were seeing that a working machine. So that's been my story as well. All these years, I show them levitation. I show them teleportation. And it's quite simple. The principles of everything I'm going to talk about tonight is There's no heavy studying or learning or academic education necessary to understand the laws of nature, and that's my premise. When I was a kid, I loved magnetics. I played with, every time I got a hold of a magnet, I had to figure out what I could do with it and turn it upside down and put it with another magnet and so forth. And I just saw the simplicity of magnetism. And I also saw that along with all the benefits of magnetism, which is electricity and electromagnetics, et cetera, magnetism itself is a great power, is a power second to none, really, in the whole universe. And while I'm going, this is from Project Camelot. I'm going to run this down and just briefly so you can see some things. That's me when I was happy. And that's me over here, if you can see it. When I wound up building a replica of our 45-foot craft in Prescott, actually Chino Valley, California, just up above Prescott. And we put it underground. It's a 45-foot dish. I'll show you pictures of that later if you're interested. And that's what I looked like then. I looked like I belonged out in nature, and that's where I was. Let's see. Here's a picture of a 45-foot craft that we had, and this was we had one in Norman, Oklahoma. Carr had that in Norman, Oklahoma. He put in for a patent for a levitation device to levitate and float these craft around, and his idea was to go back and forth to the moon and so forth and so on. The patent office looked at it and said, well, no, there's no such thing as levitation now, and that's ridiculous. We can't give you a patent on that. And Carr said, well, it's working, and your engineers have verified that I've got something here that you've never seen before, and I'm asking for a patent. And they said, no, we can't give you a patent on that because it's just not going to happen. And so they went back and forth with Carr's people and the patent people, and I'm kind of filling in here because I wasn't there, and I'm putting in pieces that I'm pretty sure are accurate. They said that if you pull the levitation device out that makes this thing levitate off the ground, we will give you a patent for an amusement device. And you can put it in an amusement park and let people ride it. So that didn't set too well, but Carr thought, well, okay, that's a start anyway. We'll put one up, and we'll get people introduced to the concept. And he then went into toys, making small models that kids could buy and mail order stuff, and then build their own models using magnets and everything to get them familiar with the technology involved. And the technology is a lot different because it's all natural. It deals with the natural science as opposed to the man-created sciences, if you will. And the difference is knowing. We live in a system of duality. We have a yes and a no, and a right and a wrong, and an up and a down, and a left and a right, and that's fine. And that's got us to where we are today. But it's also got us into kind of a bind because it replicates chasing our tail. We can't seem to make up our minds which way to go. This is a small model that we had. We can't seem to make up our minds which way we want to go. And in studying natural law, there's only one law, and that's you either know or you don't know. There's no guesswork. It's like you know when you're hungry. You know when you want to sleep. You know when you want to go to the restroom. These are knowing. These are all natural knowingness. It has a great deal of difference from the synthetic or invented system of guesswork, of belief, if you will. You can believe this, but somebody can come along and get you to disbelieve it, and vice versa. So you go around and around and around all your life sometimes for some people and never seem to get anywhere until you stand up and look into natural law, which is either you know or you don't know. And if you don't know, then you proceed along a line that's comfortable for you. You proceed into the subject matter that you're studying, and you don't give up until you know what it is. There's no more guesswork. And you don't have to try to do this, because if you're following natural law, it will come to you. All you have to do is start it. The first step is just, I want to learn this, I want to know this. And just start it, and pretty soon it will start teaching you. I didn't know a lot of things about a lot of things, and I gave up conventional education when I was in high school. In the physics class, you might have heard this if you've seen the Google or this Project Camelot presentation, but I was in physics class, and the teacher was saying, bumblebees can't fly. It's impossible. They can't, aerodynamically, they can't fly. And I was on the second floor of the classroom, and this was in Santa Cruz, California, in the high school, and I looked out the window, and there was a big, beautiful bumblebee staring at me right in the eye. And he was standing there doing something that this guy said he couldn't do. So I decided, and I was raised in the woods. I was raised in Northern California in a place called Paradise. It's up above Chico. And I learned a lot about natural law there. I pestered an anthill. We used to walk back and forth to school, my sister and I. We'd walk 7 miles through the woods to school every day, and we had to carry our water, and we had no lights and no telephone service. So we had to learn how to do things just naturally, because we didn't have anything else. Well, one of the things that taught me natural law, the first thing that I can remember, was an anthill that we encountered. It was about 3 feet, maybe higher, 3.5 feet tall, and there was thousands and thousands of ants crawling around it. And I was curious. I've always been curious, so I wanted to see what they were doing, and I started poking them with a stick to see what they do. Well, I didn't know they could spit acid. They're called spit ants or something. I don't know what they were, but they got all over me and just stung the heck out of me. And I've never forgotten that lesson. And after that, I respectfully went back and appreciated the anthill. I went back and said, gave my apologies and said, no more, I've had enough of you, and I'll behave myself. And so from then on, I understood that you get back what you put out. If you go pester something, you're going to get pestered back one way or another. Sooner or later, what goes around comes around, the old thing. That's natural law. That's the first law of nature. So anyway, getting back to the bumblebee, I quit. I got out of school. I just walked out and said, no, I'm going back to the woods, which I did. I went back to nature, and because I was learning a lot, just observing things and not pestering, but just observing and being very careful of how I observed what was happening. And I ran into a person. His name was Arthur Aho. He was the brother of Wayne Aho, who worked with Carr and I in Apple Valley and more in Oklahoma as well. He was one of Mr. Carr's entourage. And he said, well, you've got to give credit to everybody. Everything is true. And this is what Carr told me later, too. That there is nothing but truth. There's only one, and it's just one simple truth. And I said, no, wait a minute now. I've heard all these people saying this is right, this is wrong, this is up. And he said, no, everything is true in frames of reference, in degrees. in how you're looking at it. There's a principle called the Heisenberg principle. I don't know, some of you, I'm sure, have heard of it, where they cannot find an absolute. They've looked and looked and looked. In fact, they just blew up a $146 billion collider in Innsbruck, I think it was, because they were looking for the absolute. They were looking for smaller than quarks, smaller than this, we've got to find it. Well, it was a total waste of time, and I don't know what they're doing now, but they just blew up a lot of money. And what Aho explained to me was that, and he told me about the Heisenberg principle, that anything you look at, you are vibrating energy. You are radiating out of these eyes. You're radiating energy. You're a live being. And everything you're looking at, you're changing right in front of your eyes. You don't realize it consciously, but that's what's happening. So you're never going to get to the absolute, because the energy it takes to measure something also changes it. So I said, okay, well, what's that got to do with the bumblebee and the teacher? He said, well, he was right. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, he said a bumblebee can't fly aerodynamically. Yeah, and he's right. And I said, well, what did bumblebees do? And they said, well, they levitate. And I said, well, how's that? And he says, come on, I'll show you. And he showed me. He wrote a book, incidentally. I don't know if it's still in print. It's in the Library of Congress. The book is called Tomorrow's Energy Need Not Be Fuel. And in that book, he gave reference to what I'm talking about, that that of levitation, that the bumblebee, when he starts to beat his wings, when he starts to flap his wings, there's a little cavity, a hollow cavity next to the larynx inside his system that's hollow. And when he beats his wings, he starts to resonate this energy, and it goes back and forth, just similar to a guitar strumming on one side of the room and hitting the same chord on the other side of the room, or somebody hitting a high C and breaking a crystal. It's the same thing. It's resonance. And he said what they do, they resonate. And when they resonate, they eventually reach the resonance of the field around them. And he explained it this way to me, that the Earth was, of course, spinning, but it was operating on a frequency of 8.5 hertz per second or so forth. And he says once this bumblebee hits that resonant frequency of its surroundings, it becomes a free agent. It creates a magnetic bubble around itself, and it can go anywhere it wants. And I said, well, that's not in any of the science books. He said, I know. And you probably never see it there either, but that's what happens. They'll discover it someday and bring it out, but it's just we have a conventional way of doing things, and then we have a natural way of doing things, and they're totally different. They're diametrically opposed in many, many cases. Well, let's see. I'll backtrack here a little bit. This when I got out of the service, I went into the Army and went to basic training in Fort Ord, California. And I noticed I kept putting in for engineering school, and they kept putting me back in the infantry. And I noticed a phenomenon there that I'll never forget, that when we went out to the firing range, we'd have to go out every morning to fire. We'd cross this wooden bridge, and we'd have to double time in cadence, up, 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 up. And every day that we went over that bridge, it collapsed. The boards would fall apart, and the bridge would fall apart. Well, I later learned, I didn't know it then, but I later learned that this is resonance. When you reach the resonant frequency of anything, you can change it. You can transform it, if you will. So that, coupled with my interest in magnetics, got me further into magnetics, which was resonance. And I thought, well, someday I'm going to put this to use. And I've always thought of people having their transportation and their habitation as a simple vehicle that'll levitate all over. We don't have to put asphalt and cement down all over the ground. We can get up off the ground and let nature do her thing. Just go back to being a beautiful garden. And I could see then that we could put gardens on board our craft. We could have parks. We could have tennis courts, swimming pools, whatever we wanted that we have now, but we could get off the ground with it. And I was calling them floating homes. That was my my terminology in those days. I said, I've always wanted to build floating homes. After that, floating cities, and after that, floating countries. I mean, it's really going to have to happen someday. And so I'm just an early bird, I guess, or I was an early bird, until I met Carr. Well, I went in the service. I learned more about resonance, but they trained me as a heavy weapons operator, and I eventually wound up in Korea on a machine gun. And we had mortars, 4.2 mortars, and big heavy artillery. And I got wounded 4 times and got frostbite and everything. And I didn't care much for the service at all. I was really kind of burned out on it, kind of a deal. And I saw I was never going to get into engineering school. So when I got back, I got out of the service, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I looked in the paper, and there wasn't any ads for machine gunners or mortar people or heavy artillery. I didn't know what I was going to do. Well, one of the stops before Korea was Guam, a little island out in the Pacific, and while the rest of the guys were going down to fight in the bars, I found that I could go diving. Not scuba, but skin diving and snorkeling around the island. They had a lot of nice reefs and everything there. And I got real attached to the nature of diving and all the things that go on, and I learned quite a bit. So when I got out, I said, well, that's the only other thing I can think of. And I ran an ad in the paper and got some gear, and I started a skin diving and then scuba diving business. And I did some hard hat diving as well. And that was in San Francisco, California. And my family lived down the coast in Newport Beach, California. They lived down the coast, and they said, well, why don't you come on down this way? So I kind of gravitated down the coast. I stopped off in Santa Barbara and did some abalone diving for a while, and then I got down to Newport and continued my diving. And I was doing all sorts of diving, and I was doing exploration, I was doing survey work, I was doing photography work, recovery, repair, and I was doing okay financially. I met a girl and decided to get married, and I'm kind of stepping this up because I got a lot to tell you. I got married and had a couple of children, and the work that I was doing was kind of dangerous, but it paid really good. So I continued to do it until the kids were wanting a dad at home, and so was my wife. She wanted me home more often because I'd have to stay out sometimes a week at a time and sometimes more. So anyhow, one day a dive boat from a U.S. divers company, which created the aqualung, pulled up alongside, and they had heard of me and my diving, and I had kind of a daredevil diving career then, but I had a good reputation. So they said, well, would you be interested in becoming a research diver for U.S. divers? And I said, well, yeah, maybe. I'll come in and talk to you. I told my wife about it. She says, go, because she thought it'd be more money and I could stay on land more often. So I went up and talked to them and immediately got hired in the research and development department as a lab tech and a research diver. And I was given the task of the wraparound mask in those days. This was quite a while ago. And they had a mask that went all the way around, and they had distortion on both sides, and my job was to get the distortion out of the mask. Well, I did that. I went out and I kind of got the mask to work without distortion by realizing the temperature that was heated, the temperature they used to heat the glass was where the problem was. We adjusted the temperature and the distortion went away. So, but they were having me do other things, and some of them were deep dives. And I remember going down, I was down 250 feet, ran out of air, and I had to come up quite abruptly. Well, if any of you have done any diving or heard about any diving, when you're when you're down there, you're compressed. All your air is compressed. So all I had to do was exhale, but I exhaled forever coming up that distance. And I was only down there for 2 or 3 minutes, so I didn't have any hang-off time. I didn't have to decompress on the way up. But I got up to the top, and my wife had heard about that and a few other little incidences that I was involved with that were kind of risky. And she said, "No, you better find a land job, because this isn't working for the kids and so forth, and it's not going to be working for you much longer if you keep risking it." She said, "Here's an ad in the paper. It's for a lab tech at a place called Advanced Kinetics here in Costa Mesa, California," which was close to Newport. They want a lab tech. And I said, "Well, I don't have any, I'm a machine gunner and a diver. I did work as a machinist for a little while, but that wasn't very much." And she said, "Well, you're tinkering all the time. My house is full of junk, and you're putting these things together. You should be able to go down there and do or say something." So I said, "Well, okay, I'll go down and give it a shot." So I went down, and I hit them right at lunchtime. And nobody was there, no receptionist, nobody. Hello, nobody. And I was walking down the hall, and I passed the director's office. His name was Dr. Weinhardt. And he said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "I was looking for a job." And he said, "No, they're all out to lunch, come back." And I started to leave, and he said, "Wait a minute, what do you do? What's your qualifications?" And I said, "Well, I'm a student of natural law." And I thought then, well, that's the end of this interview. And he said, "Well, what do you mean? What are you talking about?" And I told him, I investigated hummingbirds, which also levitate, and lizards that also levitate. There's certain breeds of lizards. And we were talking natural law. Well, he was a PhD, and he did know quite a bit about what I was talking about in magnetics, the different fields and the different frequencies and so forth. So he said, "So you're interested in magnetics, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, one of our engineers just quit last week, and I've got a magnetic project that we're working on, and it has to be, I have to fill that position. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Sure." So he says, "You go to work tomorrow morning." I said, "Well, I haven't filled the paper." He says, "Go to work tomorrow morning, and we'll worry about the rest later." So I said, "Okay." So I went to work. I had a workbench. It was set up with a high-speed Polaroid camera and an oscilloscope and a cathode ray that was firing electrons. And my job was simple. He said, "Just get one electron through that field without deflection, without it going either to the positive or negative side. We want one to go right straight through the field." I said, "Well, that's okay." So I got on the job, and I kind of was thinking about this engineer that quit. He must have figured out what I was figuring out. This is not going to work. This is forcing this little electron. And the director came by, and he said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Well, I've increased all the power to get this thing through there, and it's not cooperating. It'd just go faster to the poles. And he says, keep on. He says, we got Boulder Dam. We got all the power. Just keep forcing that little guy. You'll get him through there someday. And he left. So I said, well, I started thinking about natural law again. I said, no, I'm getting frustrated here. This is simple. I know how to do it. And there were several benches around, and my bench over on my right was working on levitation. This was a government-funded research facility for the government. And they were working on levitation. They had a giant coil wrap, and they had a steel ball, and they would fire it up and levitate it for 3 or 4 minutes, and then it'd burn the coil up. In those days, I don't know what they're called now, in those days they were called electrons, and they were $400 a copy, and they were checking them out of supply about every 2 or 3 hours. They'd have to get a new one. So my experiment was costing in excess of $1,000 a day, and theirs must have been at least $2,000 or $3,000 a day. And I said, boy, this is a lot of money going here, and I'm gonna think about this. And I went home and I got all my junk out on the living room floor. My wife went in and shut the bedroom door and just said, okay, go ahead, you know. And what I did is I set up the experiment of my magnetic experiment. Simple, I just took a cathode ray tube out of a TV and set up magnets. And what I did, what I was told by my intuition, which is you're closer to nature with your intuition than you'll ever be. Your instinct won't get you there, but your intuition will. So I fired it up, and the first electron that I fired went through the field without deflection. It went from point A to point B. Because I pulsed it, I gave it a microsecond, literally a millisecond, a nanosecond, if you will, time to do its own thing. And it spiraled through the field. And it was coming close to both sides, but it went all the way through. I said, there it is. I knew it was simple. So I did it about 20 or 30 more times. I took pictures of it, Polaroids, wrote up the experiment, and I said, well, I'm going to work on this levitation thing. I know how to do that. And I took a 15-inch woofer speaker out of stereo, put it on the floor, had an audio amplifier I paid $25 or $30 for, and I hooked it all together, and I was playing with different stuff on there, and I finally wound up with a ping pong ball. And I was turning this thing, and I don't remember where it was, but I think it was about 28,000 cycles per second. That this ping pong ball got up and just stood there. Just stood there. And no noise. I could hear the hum, but no noise or anything. And I said, well, there it is. I'm going to get a raise. I'm going to be famous. This is it. So I wrote that up and took pictures of it. I took it into Dr. Weinhardt. And he looked at it and he said, well, shut the door and come in and sit down. And I did. And he said, yeah, I see this. He says, I know it's that simple, Ralph. I know that. That's the simplicity of natural law. And I didn't think you were gonna do that. But you have. But you don't understand that this is a government-funded facility. And we're paid to look for the answers, not to find them. So I didn't know what to say then. I thought, oh boy, this is really, I don't know what to do. So he said, now I'm going to have to shred this. Don't talk about it to anybody. Don't talk to the engineers. And I said, yeah, but now I don't know if this is, I said, this works, and I can show you that it works. And I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but I think if we pass this on to the engineers, that we could work together on this and really get somewhere. And he said, no, don't talk to them. I don't want you talking to anybody about this. Go back to work. We're paying you good money. Just keep firing that electron, and we'll keep, all I had to do. So I did, and I lasted about 2 weeks, and I had tears in my eyes when I walked out. I said, no more, I can't take it. And I knew I was really in for it when I got home, because when I said I quit, the door got locked. She said, well, you better find another job right away. So I didn't know what to do, but I met some people, and this one guy I met, he belonged to a group called Understanding. It was created by a guy named Daniel Fry in California. And all they did was come around in rap sessions once a week or twice a week. And they just brainstorm each other and get ideas, and then this one connect to this guy. Is that mine?
Folks, please turn off your cell phones.
I thought it was me. Anyway, he said, this group, I said, well, they all think I'm nuts, or they think, everything I come up with is kooky or out of shape. And he said, no, this group won't think that. Come on over and talk, because they're like you are. They're as nuts as you are. Okay. I said, okay, I'll go. So I did. I went over there, and we got to talking, and I told him my dream has always been floating homes. And, I'll rotate this a little more so you can get a little different screen on here. I don't know what we've got. That's Bill Ryan. I want to thank Bill Ryan and Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot, because they did a lot of work, not just for me, but for a lot of unknown and unsung people that have invented things that work and been there and done things that other people haven't done. And they're bringing them out to the public. They put it on you can just type in projectcamelot.org, and there's I don't know, I think they've got maybe 24 people as nuts as I am on there, and they've done different things. And so I wanted to give them another thanks. They said, well, what is it you really want to do? And I said, well, I want floating homes, and I want floating cities. And then you can have your little vehicles, little floating vehicles coming in and out of your home, go anywhere you want, and use levitation. And you don't have to use force. He said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, if you can levitate, they're using, I think it's $2 or $3 million to get one of our space shuttles, maybe more than that, just for the fuel, to get a rocket up in the sky. And I said, if you could imagine you wanting to go to China for a Chinese dinner, and you took a rocket and got around the Earth 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 miles, that dinner is going to be pretty expensive by the time you got done. But if you take a hovercraft, a spaceship, a floating home, if you will, and go up above the Earth, it's already spinning. You just have to sit there and wait until China comes around and then go down. And it's cheaper. It's a lot cheaper than rocket propulsion. So they said, okay, you're the guy we want to talk with. And we've got a guy in Oklahoma. His name is Otis Carr. And he wants to build spaceships. And you want to build floating homes. That sounds like a match. I said, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So he said, well, he's in trouble back there. One of his experiments blew up, and he was working then with some mercury, and he got some mercury splattered on him. And so because the experiment didn't work, people were kind of impatient and very, very critical of what he was trying to do. And so they, call him a hoaxer and a fraud and so forth. So we want to bring him out to California to meet you and get you guys together and put you in a laboratory where you can develop these things and get them off the ground. And I said, man, that's what I want to do. So they did. They brought it, Mr. Carr and his entourage. He had about 6 engineers and a PR man, which was Wayne Aho, and Dennis Rapoldi, which was a physicist or something. Anyhow, they all came out, and they said, well, we gotta put you somewhere till we can find you a place to work. So they put us up at, one of the people in the group had a cabin up at Lake Arrowhead. And a nice big cabin, it had 4 or 5 bedrooms. And they said, go on up there and just wait. So we went up there. And these people in understanding were guided by their intuition. They refused to do anything unless it came from their intuition. So they said, don't worry, we will get you a place and we will have it soon for you. And they did. 1 week later, they called and they said, on the other side of the mountain, in Apple Valley, California, Hesperia, we've got a laboratory for you. It's got all the facilities. It's got a warehouse, a laboratory, a machine shop. Everything's there. All you have to do is go down and go to work. And that's what we did. We went down and started brainstorming and putting together what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. Incidentally, this is, I better explain this before I get away from it. This is a Utron. For those that aren't familiar with it, I'm sure some of you, or maybe even most of you, know what platonic solids are. That came from Plato and Socrates' days. Plato coined the term, and that these solids, there's 5 of them. There's the tetrahedron, the double tetrahedron, the icosahedron. You know, these are platonic solids. Well, Carr and his people came up with this double tetrahedron, which is equally balanced. Any way you want to put this thing, in any position, it's a square, it's a circle, it's elliptical, it's a pyramid. It's one object. And it has a tremendous amount of power when you expose it to a magnetic field. It's tremendous, unlimited power. And so we started working. Let's see, did I miss anything? Okay, we started working on these things, and we weren't bothered at first. We had a pretty good run on it, and we built some small prototypes. This was one of them back here. What happened to it? This little guy here, in fact, this was the very one that I was privileged to be working with. At the time, we were increasing the vibratory rate of this little guy. And it's made out of T1, I think it is, or T6 aluminum, and very nice aluminum. But I was touching the top of it, nice and solid. But as we increased the frequency, it was getting softer and softer. And eventually, I felt my hand go right through the metal. And it was quite natural. I didn't think anything. I wasn't wow or anything. It was like, wow. But not it seemed, and Carr was overlapping because the other guys that were in there were kind of astonished that I was doing that because they didn't want to touch the thing. But anyway, before we eventually got to a 45-foot craft and demonstrated teleportation, Carr had to educate us on what teleportation was. Here's that little Utron. That's just a horseshoe magnet with a coil, copper coil around it, and that's exposed to the center of that. And at that time we had 2 moving parts. That's all we had in the whole craft. They're counter-rotating wheels. One went clockwise, one went counterclockwise. And when this began to oscillate, when it began to rotate, it built up a resonant field. It just kept pulsating, just like my hand went into that little model. It gets very, very strong. Well, Carr was explaining, and due to his education, we weren't surprised at the stuff he was coming up with. He was talking about higher consciousness. He was talking about you've got to be able to know what you're looking at outside the rules or outside the box. The box is the conventional way that we've been taught to look at things, conventional education. And when they say this can't be done, you have to untie that knot on the end. Cannot. You get rid of the knot and know that everything, without exception, can be done if you know it can be done, and never give up until it is done. And he explained that we have to, in all our experiments there, eliminate fear. It cannot be a factor in what we're working with, because you get around any of his equipment and it would stop working. If you had any type of fear in you at all, you're resonating any type of fear, that everything would stop. The stuff, the exotic stuff that we're working on. So he said, I'm going to help you get through fear. First of all, you're in a duality system, right and wrong, up and down, left and right, and you believe that you are a human being with a spirit in it. And he said it's just the opposite. You're a spirit, and you are living in a vessel, whatever you want to call it, a human or a physical being or anything. He said, you are energy. And his first law in our conventional science, 101, says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. He said, if you wake up and realize that we're all energy, we are energy, and we inhabit different fields, different frames of reference. And everything, I went past that thing I was talking about, truth. I'll get back to it. Everything without exception is true. It just depends on the way you're looking at it at that time and space. I guess an example would be, you might get mad at mom for kicking you away from the stove, from putting your hand on the hot stove, and say, oh, she's terrible. She's just, that's terrible. But later on you realize, man, I'm glad she did. I would have burnt myself. So it's the way we have of looking at things. And the way Heisenberg looked at energy through the electron microscope, he saw that he could change his thoughts and change the energy field, what he was looking at. So that he realized, he said, it's not outside of us, it's inside of us where the operator is. The I inside of us is where it's at. And you operate with the mind. Everything is done with the mind. And anything outside of yourself is, in a word, an illusion that you create in microseconds. These little flashers up here are vibrating at nano or beyond frequencies per second. And they're perceiving and putting together all this thing. Oh, I have 20 minutes left? Thanks. I want to get some questions and answers, so I'll kind of rush ahead here. I know you want to hear about the craft, so that's where we'll go. Carr said we've been exposed. Some people know about where we're at. They've seen us flying around when we'd fly them all over the desert down there, and they thought they were flying saucers. And so people got to knowing about what we were doing. And he said, he told Wayne Aho to get a hold of General Motors and fix a meeting with him to come and talk to us. And so a representative of General Motors came down to Riverside, California, in one of the big hotels. I forget what it was now. And our people, our engineers, our people, and me, I was lucky enough to go along, came down and we sat down with General Motors. And Carr said, we're here we want to work with you. You've got a manufacturing facility that, is enormous, and we're working on shoestrings. And we'd like to introduce, and we showed him a little levitating craft right on his desk. It's just standing up. It was just a small model. And we said, we want to take the wheel, which is going like this on the ground, and you have to have cement, you have to have asphalt and everything, and we want to turn it this way and get it off the ground so that you're not interfering with the natural things. You're not killing a lot of animals. You're not spoiling a lot of beauty. and you're not wasting a lot of money. And the representative said, well, wait a minute. And this incidentally goes back to Nikola Tesla, and I'm sure most of you here know about his case with J.P. Morgan. And he was one of the funders, the major funders in Tesla's work. And when Tesla said, no, we can go wireless on everything. And Colorado Springs and Wardenclyffe in New Jersey, he said, I've got what it takes to run energy anywhere, through the earth, around the earth, or any place you'd like, by sticking a rod in the ground 30 feet in the air. Everybody, without exception, can have all the electricity they'd ever need to run everything, their house, their vehicles, and everything. Now, I might have elaborated a little further than Tesla went, but that was basically the straw that broke the money man's back. He said, no, we're not going in there. We've got copper industries. We've got timber industries. These are telephone poles and copper wire. No, you're going to ruin the monetary system. So I won't go there any further because I'll get back to my story. The same thing was said by General Motors. He said, no, you're going to put all our people out of work. You're running off of magnetic energy. What's that? And Carr said, it's all, you're living in it. You wave your hand, you can operate New York City for a week on just waving your hand. There's so much energy being displaced. And he said, no, we, what was that mean? Sorry. Anyway, he said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going there. And I'm warning you, you better not go there, because if you guys put them up there, we're going to shoot them down. We're going to make sure you're not going to operate, because we don't want you. You're outlaws. You're not following conventional lines of anything, physics or anything else. So Carr was a real humble man, a real gentleman, and he said, okay, thank you very much, sir. But if it's, Tesla said if it wasn't in his time, it might be in mine. If it's not in my time, it might be in somebody else's. But it's going to happen. It's going to have to happen. Because the simplicity of natural energy has always been with us. We've just overlooked it by getting too conventional, by getting too engrossed in all the fields of science, mathematics, and all the definitions of things. When I looked at magnetism, and I came out from there and saw what they'd done to a simple line of electricity, they've called it a Dr. Watts, a Dr. Amperage, a Dr. Fahrenheit, all these names, connotations put on a simple law, which is from magnetism out, you just create a magnetic field, you create an electrical current, and that's it. Then you can dissect it in any form you want through frames of reference and get it to work in any field that you want. Well, he just as much kicked us out. He said, no, we don't want this, and you better just forget about it. Well, Carr went back and he said, we're going to have to get the 45-foot craft off the ground. We're going to have to, now, and get it up and operational so we can operate it around in different vicinities to get enough exposure where people won't let it get shut down. Okay, so he chose 3 of us to take the pilot, the first flight, or first operation, and I was one of them. And he said, now I want to tell you about this consciousness. This is the patent, incidentally, that was turned into an amusement device. That's as far as he got with it. Oh, can I use that? Yeah. Great. Yeah, okay, now this is a replica of a toy. He brought out toys. He thought, well, we'll hit the young kids. And they're smarter than some of the people that Carr had met. And we'll get them to put these toys together in the sequence that we suggest. And once they get acquainted with the naturalness of magnetics and so forth, they'll will give him the bottom line, which is levitation. So anyway, he tried, and he got as far as he could go. There's Mr. Carr there. Let's see where else we got on here. Here's another 45-footer. And I'm running short on time, so I'll just tell you about teleportation. Thanks. If I need it, I'll ask for it. Thanks. Carr said, we're gonna get this thing going. So we worked day and night for 2 weeks. I didn't get much sleep. We just worked on this thing to get it going. And he said, now this is what all this. He'd been grooming us all along in consciousness. He said, this is where it's at. It's in the mind. Anything outside of the mind forget it. You've got to operate from the inside out. And when you do that, you'll see what will happen. It'll be a continuum going on with just surprise after surprise after surprise, discovery after discovery. And we kind of said, yeah, okay, well, that's good. We'll see what happens. And so we got on board. There was 3 of us, 2 engineers and myself. And I was just a technician, but I was a gopher, too. I'd go for hamburgers or whatever we needed. So I got to go along. And inside the craft, we had a global crystal, quartz crystal, big one, about, I don't know, maybe 1.5 feet or so in diameter. And that was sitting inside like a gyroscopic thing. And then up from the bottom, it was what I equate to a laser. I don't know, it had to be a laser. The bright light coming up from the bottom. And as it came up through the bottom, it illuminated this crystal in millions, is all I can say, at least hundreds and hundreds of thousand colors. It would just fade. From red, it could take all day to go to yellow or orange. It just kept going around from infrared to ultraviolet. And he said, now, and we were in contact with him, and we didn't have cell phones. I don't remember how we did that, but I could hear him. And he said, okay, just sit down, relax. We're going on a demonstration. He said, I want you to just relax and watch the globe. And we're going to an area downrange which is equated to the frequency, because light and color and everything has a frequency. And the only way I can describe it is one of the engineers or a small crew went down and measured this field of energy at a certain field that was 10 miles from where we were. And it happened to come up as a color aquamarine in the light spectrum. So he said, just relax, just don't think. He said, don't get any thoughts. Get the trash out. Don't think about anything. So we did, and all of a sudden, this thing started pulsating, and these colors just started changing, and it went into this most beautiful aquamarine. And I've been a diver for years, and the color was magnificent. It was real brilliant. It lit up the entire inside of the ship. And it just glowed and pulsated. And then he said, okay, now this is in retrospect, because there was some of this that I didn't remember for months and months and months, and I'm still recalling some of this stuff because I don't remember all the details to it. But it was like when we got to this destination, we were told, get out and get familiar with it. Pick up some rocks and some sand and some dirt and some sticks and put them in your pockets. Just get familiar with it, and then get back on board. And then we'll fly you back. You didn't use the word fly, but we'll get you back, and that'll be the end of the experiment. Well, I'm kind of hurrying things because I know my time's limited. So we got back, and to us, the 3 of us, we didn't go anywhere. We didn't move. And I could have swore on the Bible we didn't move, because there's nothing, everything in that crap, nothing moved. We were stationary. And Carr knew the reaction we'd had. He said, you're operating in the brain. The brain is a computer that operates the body. To do anything, you have to go outside the brain. You have to go to the mind. And the mind is a collectiveness of all of us. All of us are one big mind. And to get any information or to do anything, you have to communicate respectfully with other parts of the mind. And so your brain is going to deny anything outside of its realm of operation. So he told us this before. Well, he said, come on down, we're going to debrief. We went in and sat down. He said, didn't work, did it? He said, you don't think it worked? No, Mr. Carr, nothing. We didn't go anywhere. And he said, okay, I told you guys, that the brain goes to sleep. After it reaches its optimum level of comprehension, it just goes to sleep. It doesn't go any further. But reach in your pockets and see what you got. And all of us pulled out all this rocks and sticks and stones and stuff and put them on the desk. I swear, I don't know, none of us, we didn't know what happened. And he, in his very humble but very, very wise way, told us that is teleportation. And I'll explain it to you. On the ground here, and they had an 8mm camera. The film is still circulating somewhere. I think we've got one of our people in our group. He lives in Idaho, and he may have a copy of the 8mm pictures of film that was taken of this actual craft. They're looking for it now. But anyway, he said, here you lift it off the ground and illuminated and just disappeared. Ooh. And, excuse me. And we're gone for 5 seconds. Or, I don't know, it was a short time. 5 seconds or 5 minutes. It was very, very short. I think it was seconds, though, because I remember him telling us it was very, very short. And the time that you were downrange, we later surmised was, well, it seemed like about 15 minutes. So there was a time variance, a difference. And he said, yeah, that's natural. He says, time is a measurement that we created. The universe didn't create time. We created the idea of time to measure things. You have a beginning and an end of an episode, of any type of a measurement. And outside of time is where the mind is. That's where you operate the best. And if you don't get out of your brain, you're wasting your time. You're chasing your tail. So what happened, your brain went as far as it could go, and it thought, well, hold on, we're not going anywhere. We're just sitting here, and that I guess this isn't going to work. And he said, but there's the proof. And he says, we've got it on film. So he explained that, and he was really very, very insistent on, we resonated, if you will, on the idea that we were energy, not bodies. So, and he would make us, before we'd go anywhere at night, he'd say, now remember, your energy, you can do anything. You can walk through a wall, you can go anywhere. It's just a matter of up here. This tells you can't, but the mind will say you can. And you've got to follow that mind and see where it leads you, because you can go anywhere in the universe with that. And he said that we're going to be shut down, boys. I can see it coming. And maybe the next generation, or maybe the next, but sooner or later they're going to paint themselves in a corner where there's no other way for energy. They've used up all their resources and ways to do things. It's going to become very expensive. Am I out of time? Am I out of time? Okay, I'll go on. Okay, so he said they're going to eventually paint themselves into a corner. And then is where you got them. Then they're going to start listening to people like you guys that have been there and done that. You know where you've been and what you've done. And so it's only a matter of time till they give up the conventional way of doing things and look into a higher or deeper way of doing things, which is outside the brain. Just respect the brain for what it does. It does a good job of eating and sleeping and all the other functions that a vessel or a machine like the body does. But unless you're operating from your intuition, which is the brain in essence of itself, that's where you can feel where the truth is more than anywhere else. You have to feel it inside the intuition. A gut feeling, they used to call it when I was in the service. But anyway, he said they'll be coming, and we got to get this thing operational. So I wasn't chosen to go on the next trip was to fly over Los Angeles with this craft and just make it visible. Well, incidentally, these things can become visible or invisible because of the understanding of what you're doing. It's a matter of frequencies, and it's like stealth is now, but only this is far beyond stealth. You can resonate at a frequency that the eye, the retinas, the mechanics of radar or infrared don't detect because it's outside the range of their science. So he said, we're going to take one and fly it over Los Angeles and just until we can get some exposure. Well, the next week they were getting ready to do that. These vehicles, military vehicles, big 10-bys I think they call them, big military vehicles, all kinds of soldiers and everybody pulled into the compound. And then these guys came up to us and with a paper and said that we were cease and desist or whatever the words are, I don't know. But he said, you're no longer allowed to operate because, and Carr said, why? He said, well, you're attempting to overthrow the monetary system of the United States. And that can be a treason. That can be. So Carr said, well, we're trying this tinkering here, trying to get things to work better for people. And they said, no, we're going to have to confiscate everything. That's where they took the one that I was in, they took to New Mexico. They took all our facilities. They went into the lab. They went through everything and took boxes and boxes of paperwork and stuff out. And then they interrogated us, I guess that's the word for it, for hours and hours and hours, and told us, not to talk about it. And they threatened us with all kinds of unhealthy things. And so we dispersed. We had to. And they made sure that Carr and I and the others weren't in the same state. We went all over the place. Carr went back to Baltimore, Maryland, and I went to Northern California. But I had never given up trying to build craft, and I've always been working on them all my life. And so when I left Carr, I finally got into understanding a little bit about solid-state circuitry, that you don't need any more moving parts. So that obsoleted the moving parts that we had. Then digital came along. I go, oh, that's even better. So we started getting into electronics that I didn't even understand. I still don't to this day understand electronics. But I have built in my mind and some small replicas of craft to the best of my ability operating without any moving parts. I got out of the city and I went into a place in Arizona called Prescott, Arizona. It's up Chino Valley, a little out of Prescott, and decided to build a big laboratory there and do the same thing Carr did. I'll get some trusted people to work with me, and we'll get some small prototypes going and then build bigger ones and bigger ones. And so I went into the building, people, and I told them I wanted to build a house that was just off the ground. And they said, no, you can't do that. And they said, you're going to have to anchor it down, you're going to have to put rebar, and you're going to have a septic system with leach lines and everything. And I had all these other ways that I wanted to present to them that I said, this is simple. Here's a system in Sweden that works with, it's a septic system that completely recycles itself. Everything, there's no waste involved because the methane is used. It is so pure when it comes out of the septic system that you put it in your garden. I mean, it's a very, and they said, no, we don't have that on our books. It's not in our books. You can't do that. You've got to have a giant block, put it in the ground, and put these leach lines out. And I had a nice garden going down there, and they said, no, you've got to go down through that garden and put these leach lines out. Well, anyhow, we got constantly interrupted. And so we decided, just my wife and I, there was just two of us, to build a replica, because I still have it in my genes, of all the dimensions and all the frequencies, of the craft. So we built, I'll just show you that real fast. My time's up. I'll show you what we did, if I can find it. There it is, I think. Come on. And so we built a replica of the craft underground. We went 9 feet down, and we were doing it all by hand, just the two of us, and we decided that that's where we... Can I use it again?
Sure. You click on any one of the pictures, it'll come up.
Oh, it will?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Or
Okay.
we can go to a slideshow.
Okay, let's go to a slideshow real fast. Slideshow.
See it on the left? Does it say
Yes, I do. Okay, I got to go back one frame. Let's see, can I...
you can hit the left arrow.
Okay, let's see, that's not it. Okay, well, let's see, what happened to it? Oh, here it is. Okay. My wife was a scientist, a brilliant scientist, and a scientist not of this world, because she understood sacred geometry, the meridians, the ley lines, and everything. And she laid out everything and helped me, and she wanted to see that we could go ahead with building spaceships. So now, let's see. So I'll just let this run, and I'll just talk about 5 more minutes. So I built a small laboratory there in a little machine shop, and I started producing small little crafts that they weren't quite levitational. I was having little problems with them. Oh, it didn't work.
Hit the right button.
The right button? What did I do? I always run into trouble on this.
Running through you.
I don't know what happened. Oh, man. What did I do?
Yeah, let me try.
Okay. So anyway, we built an exact replica. We used, there was a lot of quartz crystal around that area and a lot of tourmaline crystal, and we used a lot of crystal because of the understanding of crystals and the energy that they hold and can transmit. They're real pure to hold energy for long periods of time. So anyway, we went underground and, huh? What do you say?
Speaking in the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Anyway, you just, can we get it on? Is it going? Anyway, so we built an exact replica with all the, say, click. Okay, click on the first one. Oh. Oh, dang. Ah.
This is wild. Okay. Maybe that one is just getting...
Okay, try the next one.
There we go.
There we go. Well, anyway, this is where we started. We bought a piece of land facing north, and they said, "You're nuts," and everything. And we said, "No, we'll do something." Well, everything we did, both her and I, was from our intuition. We didn't move. We sat for 3 days in a pickup and sleeping in the back of a pickup until the land chose us, until we knew that that was the right place that we were going to build.
This is how you advance, right?
And
This button right there.
That one? Okay, thanks. So it won't go on a slideshow?
Pardon me?
It won't go on a slideshow?
Well, I had it stopped so you could do them individually. You wanted to go automatically.
Yeah, I'm out of time. Can I
Okay,
put it on
sure.
a slide? Okay. So anyway, I did get some small craft that were, they were semi-operational, but they glowed quite a bit. And the neighbors were wondering what the heck we were doing. We're like Dr. Frankenstein up there working on the hill. And so I had a friend, his name is Walter Baumgartner. He wrote a book called Energy Unlimited, if you've ever seen it. And he said, "Well, you guys are going to run into trouble here. They're giving you all kinds of hassle on building codes and everything. I've got a place in New Mexico. Let's go over there and build them." So I said, "Well, we'll commute." And that's what we did. We went back and forth to New Mexico, and we're building some small craft there. That's when we got the hole dug. And the only thing we hired was a backhoe to build the hole, dig the hole. And that was, it's 45 feet in diameter and 9 feet deep. And we hit bedrock. And so we started putting things together, just her and I. But every move we made was by our intuition. And even when I started laying the blocks, in the middle of the night, if I had laid a block that didn't feel right, I'd have to get up out of bed and go down there with a flashlight and move that block just maybe a half an inch till it felt good. And the results were a home you'll see in a minute here. I know I'm out of time, I'm sorry. But the results you'll see in a minute is a home that to this day, and we were just down there just a couple of months ago, is still standing strong. There's not a crack in it. It was earthquake proof. They had no nails, everything. There was no load bearing walls necessary because of the way it was built. And it was then going to be I had retired from the locksmith business, but I thought, well, maybe I can become a consultant getting people to build these kind of homes and then introduce slowly into levitation devices. Well, Baumgartner got the crafts built, and he was operating them just the same way I was in Prescott. They were not fully operational. And what was lacking in both of us at the time was the consciousness that Carr had tried to make us aware of, that you've got to get out of the box, if you will. You've got to get further than just thinking you're going to put nuts and bolts together and it's going to work, because it doesn't work that way. It has to operate from the mind, and it will work every time without exception. So anyway, this is the replica of the 45-foot craft. And it was built by just her and I, except for the backhoe guy. And it took us 8 months to build it. And I turned into a garage sailor, both my wife and I. We went to garage sales and estate sales and any other kind of sales we could find. And even the lumber, we'd gone to an architect too to see what he charged us for plans. And he said, "We don't work from a radius point, we work from rectangles and squares." So my wife stuck a stake in the ground with a nail on top of it and tied a piece of string on it, and 45 feet out with the string, I walked around and put flour to mark the where we were going to start to dig. And that's how we started. Eventually, the lumber, we went to the lumber companies. They wanted $6,000 for the lumber that we needed or something like that. And we found a place that up near Flagstaff, Arizona, a retired lumber person that he started his own lumber mill on his land, and would go up to the burned areas. The government said, well, you can go have all the lumber you want, just haul it away for free. And we got our lumber cut and delivered and everything. The whole thing didn't cost $2,000. So anyway, we went up and up and up with it, and we got to a point where it was semi-completed. On the top of this was going to be something similar to a monolithic dome, which would water itself. We had gardens that were already taking care of themselves. They water and feed themselves. We go back and forth to New Mexico and leave our garden, and we'd come back and everything was going fine because we had sensors that when it got hungry, it would turn on the food, and when it got thirsty, turn on and off the food. We're going to do the same thing in the dome and have a garden up there. And before I got there, we were running low on money, and I said, well, I guess I'm not going to become a consultant. I better think about going back into locksmithing. But Baumgartner got a break. Somebody had given him some money, and he went a little further with it. And he did get some operational vehicles, but they had approached him and told him that they were not allowed. They couldn't be allowed to go any further than he was going. That you can play around with it and talk about it, but you can't start producing these things. You can't start manufacturing them anyway. So anyway, that's my story. You'll see there's that septic system they had me put in, and I could have put a septic system in that for about $300 that would take care of everything. We could have used the methane gas to cook with and so forth. And this one cost me $1,500. But even with that and the lumber and everything, when we got the house completed to where you'll see it here in just a jiffy, the whole cost of the house to build it was $5,000. That's all it cost. And it heated and cooled itself because of the donut shape, the hole in the center. The sun had come through, the solarium as we called it, and heat up. We had a heat sink, really, a flagstone about 3 inches thick on the floor of the center of this. We collect the heat, and in the wintertime, you could feel the radiation off those rocks at night come into the house because we have doors around, the glass doors. We could open the doors and the heat would come in. In the hot, hot summer, because we were facing north, the cold side of the planet, the sun would come through the center and draw in the cool air through the front doors. We cracked the front doors open, and we could feel all day long this cool, just a soft, gentle, cool breeze. So we had kind of a natural air conditioning going, and on and on and on. The spider helped us build this roof because we were watching a spider. We called her Charlotte, and we watched her build her web and how she put everything together. And when we laid the roof in, we laid these planks so that when we eventually put decomposed granite on it, we put 40 tons of decomposed granite on it. When we got it on there, it locked in and got it very, very sturdy. Anyway, I guess that's my talk. I've got some tapes. I forgot to bring a sign that I'd made up. It'll be here tomorrow, probably. We're getting it faxed up. But I've got some discs of all this and much, much more about talks that I've given. Otis Carr talking on the radio, his transcriptions in writing so you can read them. And these discs are free. There's no cost. There's no charge to anybody. And I want you to know that because the more I can get this information out and get everybody thinking and feeling and doing and knowing things that I know, the faster we're going to get where we need to be. We need to get back to where we were at one time. We lost our way. Now, my associates have suggested that a donation would be appropriate to cover the cost of making the disc, and I don't have a problem with that, but I'm not asking for a donation. I'm not doing that. The information's free, and they'll be out on the table, probably on Terry's table, I understand. And they deal with different talks that I've given, different information that's never been out before, that I've had for a long time. And I think you'll find the interview with Otis Carr very interesting, because he'll tell you exactly how these things are operating, the Utron, and he was attacked by many people with, I know my time's up, people with scientific, scientists were on the program saying that what he was proposing was preposterous, it was not going to work, and so forth and so on. But you'll find it interesting. Now, if I got a minute, I can answer a couple of questions, or am I completely out of time? Some questions. There's a microphone up on your left-hand side. We ask people if you want that microphone to ask your questions. This is the house nearing where we got the dirt we hauled out. We made a big parking lot out in front, hauled it all out. And a lot of this was just pick and shovel work, my wife and I working. And this was our clock. Those are mirrors around the periphery of the solarium, and they'd shine down during the day on the walls down inside the home, and we could tell within a minute or two what time it was. You know, we got pretty good at guessing the time. And the structure was super strong. We had a friend who was a retired building inspector come out, and he said, well, this thing's built 5 times over code. He says it may not be, conventional, but it's built 5 times over code. You can put, a 5-story building on top of that. You don't have to worry. So anyway, it was a demonstration, and I was hoping this would be my laboratory so that we could get back to the work that we were doing with Carr, but we ran low on money, and people thought everything I had was a good idea, but nobody wanted to do anything in those days. So I went back into locksmithing for a while, and then I retired again until Project Camelot pulled me out of the cave and said, no, let's talk about it again, see if people are interested. So now on the walls, later on, we put a 2-inch double wall with a kind of a loose side. I forget the name of it now. It's been so long ago. And we put God, I can't think today. An amplifier so we could amplify the light. We had lights, colored lights that we could change the colors of the walls behind it. So we could change it from blue or green or red or any color walls we wanted. It was quite simple to do. It was just making a double wall, and I had an amplifier. And then all our plumbing, all our electricity was underground. It's all underneath the sand. These are sand floors. And then we put carpet where it's necessary, where we felt it was. But we had it that way so that we could relocate the rooms. If we got tired of the kitchen on the left side of the house, we could move it to the right side just in a couple of hours. We could move the bathroom. We could move the kitchen and the bedrooms. We had no load-bearing walls. These are translucent walls, and they only went up 8 feet. Our ceiling was 9 feet, so we had circulation on the top. But anyhow, infinitum that went on and on and on. I'm sorry, if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, I'd like to know the shape of the crystals that you used in the
The shape of the crystals?
Yes.
Well, we tried to find, coincidentally, the double tetrahedrons, where they're terminated, double terminated crystals. And we'd go up into the, up around Flagstaff, into some of the old lava tubes and look for different tributaries that would lead us off into areas that we began to learn crystals were. And we used a lot of double terminated crystals. We couldn't always find enough that we needed, but they had like a diamond shape.
Right. And they were all quartz, and you
They
mentioned
weren't
tourmaline.
clear. They were quartz, white quartz, most of them.
White quartz.
White quartz.
Okay, and can you tell me the difference between kind of white quartz versus a normal quartz you'd find, say, like in Arkansas? Is there,
Yeah.
It's the same,
Sure,
okay.
crystal is crystal, no
Okay.
matter where you find it.
Okay.
And you just have to understand what crystals are and what they do and what they can do. We had tourmaline on there too, and I experimented with that, and I was able to produce electricity from tourmaline crystal. It will produce electricity.
Okay, and you talked about the light source that went through the crystal. You don't know what that light source was? Was that a laser? You mentioned a laser?
Oh, you mean on the ship? I'm
Yes.
sorry, on the ship. It was a circular globe. And there was a laser, or bright, I'm pretty sure it was a laser coming up from the bottom. And as it came up, it just illuminated this entire...
So the crystal was circular. The crystal was circular
circular, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the crystals we put in the
No.
house. Okay, I'm sorry. It was circular.
Okay.
There was another guy that built a craft. He's on here. I'll just show you that really briefly. See if I can get down to him. His name was Chris. I forget his last name. And he went to the authorities. He went to the Navy with a craft that it was a boat. It could go up estuaries. It would never draw any more than 6 inches of water. And, oh gosh, where is it? Come on. Well, shoot. It's a lot of pictures. Yeah, it is. Well, my wife she was the one with the camera. If it had been up to me, we'd probably never got any pictures. She had to go out and take a picture of everything we did. Oh, I got to show you this guy. Come on. Okay. This is a craft. Turkey.
Is that the picture up on the left?
Yeah.
Okay, just double click on it.
Click on it. Okay. Anyhow, Chris went to the government with this craft that he built. It would never displace any more than 6 inches of water, which means they could have a military vehicle going up any estuary or any small river or tributary, and you could put 100,000 tons on it and it would never displace any more than 6 inches of water. And he proved that to them. He was down in Coronado, California. See if I can find it. Oh, I can't switch it now. Can I switch here?
Yeah.
This one?
This window. We're in a different program now.
I want to show you the craft in Coronado. This is the same craft. And he tried to get them interested, and they said, "Oh man, you can't do that," and so forth.
Which one is it?
And it's down at the bottom. Okay,
Yeah, that one there?
that's one of them. That's where he landed up. He landed up near us, up above Paulden in Arizona. After the government kept giving him such a hassle, he took this craft, and there's one on the water. This is the one I want.
Okay.
This is him in Coronado. If you can make it large. That's the craft. It never displaced any more than 6 inches of water. And so they thought, they just gave him a hard time. And he said, "Okay, boys, I've had it with you guys." And he went and sawed it into pie shapes, into wedges. He's got a lowboy truck, and he hauled it to Arizona, him and I guess he had some help with it, and put it on top of a remote mountain. I bought some land just across from him. That's how I got acquainted with him. And put this thing back together, and he says, I'm going to live here till I die because nobody's interested in this technology. And he just died last year. So anyway, that's the way it goes. And I'm on my way out too, I suppose, one of these days. But before I go, I just hope you consider what I've talked about. Using the mind, get out of the box. Don't use guesswork. It doesn't work anymore. And if you are interested in a better form of transportation and habitation, it's on its way. And I belong to several groups. We have a rather large group formulating and participating with this kind of activity on the big island of Hawaii. I can't talk too much about it now, but it's in operation, and we want to build floating homes. And I've got somebody that's with us now, so we're in a group. There's 6 of us, actually. Elizabeth Rauscher, I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She's one of us. She's a nuclear physicist and been to Lawrence Livermore, been very, very famous in the science realm, that got to a point and said, this isn't going to go anymore. You've got to go to consciousness and raise it up higher, because science is going to go around and around and around forever until we get out of the box. She's one of us. There's 6 of us, and we're called the Elders of the Round Table. And I happen to be the oldest, so I'm the elder of the eldest of the round table, and Elizabeth is just under me. But anyway, they're all eager beavers, and they're dedicated. One of the guys, his name is Bob Blood. He built a magnetic motor. I went to his lab and I saw it. He fired it up. He had a 12-volt millimeter. It was drawing 12.5 or something. And he said, okay, now watch. And he started loading this up with 100-watt bulbs. And it never moved. The needle never moved. It just kept, no matter how much load he put on it, the needle never moved. And he said, well, now, by this point in time, the motor should be hot. And I said, yeah, maybe. And he said, well, feel the motor. And it was ice cold. And it was moving, all moving parts, ice cold. So it was all magnetics. It was just 2 rotating, counter-rotating magnetic things. I had a device to show you, but I guess we can't find it. It was just a simple little device, and you can get one at Radio Shack. I just had a straw with 4 donut magnets on the straw, turned upside down so that the fields were opposing. And, you can't put those together.
Is it somewhere in here?
No, she was going to look for it. I guess I didn't pack it, or it got lost. And in the center of that field, just like the Utron, that's where all the power is. There's an enormous amount of power in a magnetic field right in the center. And we've been looking at it all our lives, and we've never seen it. And that's the way our hovercraft operate, on pure magnetism, not electromagnetism, not anti-gravity, and none of that. It's pure magnetism. It's very, very simple in the operation. And I just will go one more step and tell you that we have these things now available. They're waiting in the wings for people to accept us, to accept the technology. It has to do with esoteric psychology, esoteric science, into the realms of the ethers, if you will, ether technology. It hasn't got anything to do with the conventional stuff. So we're still getting opposition. But if they will allow us to just keep going the way we're going right now, within, I'd say, 2 years, you're going to see us all over the place with crowd. And we intend to do that. And that's my job. I'm not going to go anywhere until it's done. So, I'm sorry.
How does your craft levitation work relate to Searle Disk and your house work to Buckminster Fuller's work?
How what?
How does it relate or compare?
Oh, to the house?
The house to the Buckminster Fuller's work and
Yeah.
serval disk for your levitation
Yeah.
disks.
Well, it all deals with the premise of sacred geometry. It is, if you walk anywhere near that house, and we've had Indians come down from the reservation, we've had people go around the house. I can't even explain it to you. It's just different, and you have to experience it to know what I'm talking about. But in sacred geometry, when things are resonating, and crystals are always resonating, and you get in the center of that field, and you're resonating, and you allow yourself to feel the resonation, there's a tremendous awareness of what the correlation is between everything. Everything is paralleling somewhere, and this is paralleling at that level. Sir.
Yeah, Mr. Ring, do you know Larry Wilson? Was he involved in any of this that you know of?
Who was that?
Larry Wilson.
No, I don't know.
Because he was one of the scientists that was working on the project with Otis T. Carr.
I don't know the name. I've known several people. In fact, there's only about 3 or 4 of us alive. One of them tomorrow that will be speaking, Jim Murray, worked with Carr. I worked with Carr. There's Arthur Matthews just died. He worked with Carr. And there's another person by the name of George Freebot that still has some of the original Utrons that we used in the craft. And there's only 3 or 4 of us.
Well, the counter-rotating disc was invented by Larry Wilson when he was working for Lear Aircraft. And the story you told about the craft turning to jelly, Larry actually had this happen. He was demonstrating it to Old Man Lear, who was the inventor of the Lear aircraft, and that's what happened to the thing, is that they spun the thing up, and once the outer periphery of these magnetic disks reached the velocity of the Earth, it lifted off the ground and turned to this weird jelly, and they tried analyzing the jelly, and it was they could never figure it out. But the original design of those counter-rotating discs was from Larry Wilson, and I knew him personally.
I'll be darned.
And he showed me one of the systems that he had developed from that.
Wow. Wow, I'd like to talk to you later about that. I wasn't familiar with him. We had one disc, the second disc that I worked on in the shop, completely and totally disappear. It went beyond the frequency that I had my hand in it, and this thing just went like this, and it went. And Carr came over and said, "Don't worry, boys." And we asked him where it went. He said, "It might have landed on somebody's table. We don't know where it went, but that's teleportation." And he says, "That's just, dimensions are only insights away. And when you understand who and what you are as energy, you can see through dimensions. You can see and understand what dimensions are. They're infinite in length and breadth and everything." So, I'm sorry.
I was just curious, is it in the literature or on the CDs that you have what material the Utrons were made out of?
Is there any literature about the materials that
Yeah, I was just curious what material the Utron was made out of.
Well, yeah, I can tell you because it's been quite a while, but I think it's either T6, I'm pretty sure it's T6 aluminum. There's a T6
Okay.
and there's a T7.
Oh, okay.
And we use T6 aluminum.
For the outside of the craft. Okay, and so that's a hollow then?
No, we had all kinds. We had hollow and we had solid. I was going to bring a solid one here with me, and I couldn't find it. It's around my house somewhere with my junk, but I had a nice one I was going to show you, but and that one's solid. But I've got some hollow ones too that they come apart because we were experimenting with different things. We were at one time using mercury and stuff like that, but we found that wasn't necessary.
Okay, thanks, Ralph.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm always looking for things that I can duplicate, and that thing you said about Mr. Blood intrigues me a lot. Are there plans or anything for Mr. Blood's little motor that was lighting up lights?
Okay, I heard part of that. I'm sorry.
I'd love to try and build things.
Oh, You want to build a spaceship?
I'd like to build that thing he said that could light up a bunch of lights.
The one with the lights?
Yeah, Mr. Blood's magnetic motor with 2 counter-rotating
Oh, yeah,
discs.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if I can get his permission, I will give you his phone number. He's in Hawaii.
Okay.
And we're trying to keep things kind of quiet over there. We don't want a lot of, because over there the rules and regulations are different than here. Here, if you start building an outhouse that looks different from the guy next door, they come in and want to change it. They want you to build the same thing. So that's why we're in Hawaii, and they're very, very receptive to what we're trying to do. But his name is Bob Blood, and I'll give you his. I'll get his permission, and you can talk to him in person. And
Okay.
I'm sure if the group that we're involved with now, if it's okay with him, I'm sure he'll be glad to. He wants to spread the
I'll get with you then.
information. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm very fascinated with a lot of your ideas. And the idea of having a house that not only levitates but can be invisible is a big plus. Matter of fact, it would make an excellent RV as well.
It sure would.
And my question is about the crystal generator that you said you built that generated electricity. Was it a usable quantity of electricity? And
Well, the crystal generated. Well, I guess you could say eventually it came out as electricity, but it was frequencies. It was vibrations of energy fields. It's similar to. In the old days, they used to have these vibrating beds, or they got vibrators for your back and stuff. It's just vibrations.
Yeah.
And when you have them in a cavity, when you vibrate anything in a cavity, it's like a Tesla coil, only it steps up 10 times stronger. It becomes very, very, very strong when you resonate anything in a cavity. And that's in your human vessel. If you get an idea and you forget the brain, as I mentioned before, it's not that hard to do. You get an idea and you start kicking it back and forth. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. You'll find that you've already done it before you realize what you've done.
I want to
it works
build a
that fast.
generator of some kind that will generate power enough for my house without using a solar is very expensive.
Well, the conventional stuff now, they're breaking through on all levels, including solar. They've got a 3 minutes, okay. They've got a paint now that you can paint your car, your house. It's you can go on the internet and type in solar energy or go to free energy, and because they've got a lot of information on there, and go down to this liquid solar. There's no more sand involved. There's no more cutting. It's cheap, very, very cheap, and they're trying to get it out so that to the public, so that we can paint our homes and our houses and things with it.
Well, I'm glad to see anybody doing any advanced work, and I think Peter Lindemann is supposed to maybe have an advanced version of a motor that may be useful for that purpose as well.
You're going to see one tomorrow morning. My friend and compadre, Jim Murray, I don't think he's here yet, is going to show you a motor, or he's going to show you at least a film of the motor that he presented. It puts out a lot more energy than it takes to operate it.
Well,
And he was the one that
wonderful.
worked with
I look forward
Tesla.
to that, and also I look forward to that day when I can have an invisible house. Let the IRS try to repo that one.
It's not as hard as you think. It's really simple. It's just a matter of getting the hang of it. Okay,
Well,
I guess I'm done. Thanks for everybody. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you.